So, we'll just see how this next bit goes, because I haven't taught this to people before, so this seems like the next bit to unwind, and we're going to look at the environment of the central nervous system and nerves, and how it reflects, of the fluid, of the cranial fluid in that whole area, and how that reflects through the whole body. And we're going to look at the anatomy of that, so this might knock people out a bit who aren't used to anatomy. And we're going to look at the difference between the junctions between cells, tight junctions and loose junctions. This is quite important, or vitally important, for dealing with cranial fluid. Generally, through the whole body, and including the capillaries, these have loose junctions. And with the capillaries, that means that water can come out through the junctions, amino acids, fatty acids, all the different things for feeding the body. These can come out through those junctions. Some can also come through the cells, but they can come out through the junctions. And then between all of the cells, I think in the kidneys there may be some tight junctions where it's filtering water, but generally through the whole body, all of the cells are held together by loose junctions. And I think these are, I'm not 100% sure of the anatomy of this, but I think they're mainly proteins, something like that. So this picture is actually of the ependymal cells that line the whole of the ventricles. And they're cuboidal, they're square. And as you can see, they've got little blue dots. These are the junctions that holding the cells together. And the ependymal cells that line the whole ventricle system there, these are loose junctions. So that means the cranial fluid and everything within it can easily flow between it. So then through your whole body, you have all of these cells that are held together by loose junctions, and that means what comes out of the blood, the water, the plasma, the nutriments or nutrition. Someone told me off for saying nutriments because it's apparently a new word. Nutrition, nutriments, I'm going to call it nutriments. And these can flow between all of the cells, and they can feed the cells, they can feed it with whatever nutrition it needs, the oxygen it needs, and this is called interstitial fluid. And then from that it produces different wastes and carbon dioxide. And you can pull me up on this because I really am not 100% sure of my anatomy. And then this comes back out of the cell as waste, and this is picked up by the lymph, and the carbon dioxide is also taken back by the venous blood. And that's kind of how it works in the body. And as we looked before, this amount of blood, the red arterial blood, again I think that's another new word. No, it's not a new word, it's okay, alright, arterial blood, great. It's coming out. This has got a strong pressure to it. This is, when it comes back as the venous blood, the pressure has gone down by 90%. The arterial blood has got 10 times more pressure, as it's gone to, I think it's something like 80,000 miles of capillaries that are only just wide enough for one cell or one blood cell to travel through. As it's gone through that, the pressure has gone right down and it's travelling back at 1/10 of the pressure. So this can travel fast. The arterial blood can travel fast. The venous blood is coming back much more slowly. So it can't bring back all of that fluid that it's taken out of the body. The rest of it comes back in the lymph much more slowly. So this is travelling fast, this is travelling slowly, this is travelling much more slowly. So in the body you have this transmission of blood coming out with all the nutriments and all of the oxygen, and then you have it coming back to the heart with the venous blood and the lymph, and this takes a lot of the carbon dioxide, the lymph takes a lot of the toxins, but this is going slowly, and this is going slowly, and this is going very slowly. Now, I'm showing you this because it's mirrored in the central nervous system. So, firstly, again, we've looked at this a bit before, but I want to get the environment so we can visualize it as we're doing the meditations. Now, the cells in the central nervous system are not joined together. Well, these are cells in the central nervous system, but the glial cells, all of these, the neurons, the astrocyte cells, the microglial cells, these are held together by tentacles. They're not just a bit of water travelling around the cell the width of a protein that's holding the cell. Suddenly there's just hugely more fluid. Huge, I don't know how much more, but massively more fluid. The cells can move around in it, and it's much more like seaweed in the sea. The image we have of the brain and central nervous system is of a solid thing. It's in fact fluid. And it is a combination of, in the body, it's kind of the interstitial fluid and lymph, because there's no lymph ducts, it's an open system. So, one, there's a much more spacious environment, much more fluid. And the second thing is, the fluid is much more refined. It's 99% water. Both in the choroid plexus, and this is a capillary in the brain. See the joins? These are, what's the name of it? Endothelial cells. You get around the capillaries. The wall is made of endothelial cells. Now these have tight connections. They're very close. They're so close that only 100% pure water can get through. No proteins, no oxygen, no glucose, no nothing other than water. So what is coming out through the junctions is water. Water will also, if the pressure is more in the capillaries than outside, water will just go through the cell via osmosis, and that will spread out, which gives you this environment of water. And then the cells will allow safe passage for only oxygen, glucose, salt, neurotransmitters, things for the brain, central nervous system and nerves. So you end up with this environment of water, basically. And also in the choroid plexus, these are the ependymal cells which surround the whole of the ventricles, but as soon as they become the choroid plexus, they swap from being loose connections to tight connections that will only let water come through, and then it again chooses glucose, oxygen and salt and the different neurotransmitters. So it does the same thing as the capillaries in the brain. And there's one big difference in that the choreplexus works both ways. It will produce cranial fluid, but also these cells will take out carbon dioxide and any toxins. So it's a bit like the choreplexus breathes. It goes both ways. And also a big difference to the whole rest of the central nervous system, you've got the arterial capillary and a vein capillary here. These have loose connections. So this is the same as in the body. So everything will be coming out into the space inside the choreplexus. And then you get envelopes of the ependymal cells wrapped around those, which seals it from the rest of the brain. So we're getting too complicated, or we're all right, kind of. Okay, we're getting a bit too complicated. So what I'm kind of pointing to here is to change something. Who knows what the blood-brain barrier is?
Heard of it.
I know there's certain drugs that can go over it and some can't.
Pardon?
There's certain drugs that get through and some can't. And like bilirubin can get through, I think.
So this is, I mean, most people in the west of the Western, the West, and probably a lot of people in the east of the globe, have heard this name, the blood-brain barrier. Now, this is one of those words for me that gives an image. And my image of that was that nothing can get into the brain, or very little can get into the brain, and very little can get out again. And I'd heard people say things like, it's very hard for the brain and central nervous system to detox because of the blood-brain barrier. It presents an image of a barrier. So we're going to change the name of that. The blood-brain barrier is this. It's the endothelial cells. So because they're calling it a barrier, because it's not loose junctions, it's not just letting everything come into the environment. And you've got to realize there is a particular environment in this whole area that is being made that does need to be protected. I mean, you know what happens if you have an aneurysm and blood gets into the brain. You don't really work properly after that. So if blood comes into the brain, or even, you know, the general nutriments in the blood, if the blood, what they call the blood cells, I've forgotten what they're called.
Erythrocytes.
Pardon?
Erythrocytes? Erythrocytes?
No, the ones that carry the oxygen.
The hemoglobin.
Hemoglobin, yeah. Well, if those cells come out, they cause the and because they clot in the brain, I think that's what happens. But also the proteins, the fatty acids, things like that, they mess with the cells of the brain. The brain does not work properly. So there's a very particular environment. So that happens as on a physiological level, it messes with the cells in the brain, but also for us on a spiritual level, it clouds the water. Suddenly you haven't got such a pristine environment. Light doesn't shine through cloudy water as well as it does through clear mineral water. So there is an environment for me which is like a port. It's like you've got the brain. Actually, here we go. my central nervous system. It's full of water. Light can come in here, white light, dark light, light can come up. But it's an environment that light and energies can shine through easily. The cells are spread out by tentacles and more like seaweed. The water in it is actually water. It's, you know, it's nearly mineral water. I always thought whilst making this, it would be good to bring out a drink, a water drink that was similar to cranial fluid. Have your energy drink, this is good for your brain, drink this. And how important it is to drink water, because the whole centre of our system is water. I saw your Facebook thing that water is God today. Yeah. So there does need to be a division, but that calling it the blood-brain barrier has instituted a global image of division. This is the capillaries in the central nervous system. I think it's 400 or 500 miles of capillaries. This is what they're calling the blood-brain barrier. You can call it for what it is. It's a 400-mile long, sensitive, intelligent filter. And that is a different image to a blood-brain barrier. It's a bit like in your house you decide to put a water, it is basically a water filter. You want to put a water filter on, you've got the mains water coming in, you put a water filter on it, and then it comes into your sink. You wouldn't call that a water basin barrier, because you think, well, the water's never going to get into the basin. You call it a water filter. And that is the same with that. Our emphasis on that is what is being produced rather than what is being stopped. And it gives you a different image, and an image you can meditate with and use as an internal thing. So
is there a sort of two-way street, you know? Well, like the blood-brain barrier or filter, whatever you want to call it. I mean, is fluid going
we're going
both ways?
to go on to that.
Oh, right, okay.
Yeah, we're moving on to that. So, in a way, so that this is as like, and it was interesting because when I was making these videos and this information of how I saw this and the myelinated glial cells, how it can travel off there, I felt very alone because everybody, all the cranial schools that I knew of were teaching it totally different. All the scientists saw it as totally different. I thought, well, I just gone nutty. This just seems to make sense to me this way, and that way just does not make sense. And I was speaking, well, to a couple of people actually from the Sutherland College of Cranial Osteopathy, and they said, no, we see it the same as you see it. We see it as the interstitial fluid in the brain and the cranial fluid are the same thing, and they travel off down through the nerves. And they said, that's how we palpate it, that's how we feel it. We don't know how it travels off down the nerves, but I'm sure at some stage they would find out. And I said, well, actually, look, I think it flows down, the nerves are, the nerve fibres actually nerve capillaries, and I showed them how it worked. And they said of the blood-brain barrier, they don't call that the blood-brain barrier, they called it the wellhead, which is actually much more depictive of what it is, and it gives you a healing image of what is happening there and of that flowing off down through the nerves. So there's a, language-wise, there's a barrier going into the brain. And I can kind of understand it, that they kind of want to protect this environment, that so it stays that rather the same as what's coming out of the blood and the interstitial fluid through the whole body. It just wouldn't work. It needs, in some ways, to be separated. And then coming out, so that's on the inside, then coming out to protect it, I guess, to say, well, the cranial fluid can't come out through the dural membrane, which is round all of this, and can't come out through the nerves. So you've got a barrier coming in, you've got a barrier coming out. And that produces a dislocated and divided image. But then, and I just presume that is the reason how this original theory has come about, because they wanted to have a way of demonstrating that that area is protected. I may be totally wrong, it may just not make sense, the scientific image. But then you have a problem. Then you have the same thing as we mentioned before. You've got the arterial blood coming to this whole central nervous system, strong and fast. The venous blood coming back out from here. And then there's no explanation for this fluid, where it goes. Now there is for the cranial fluid in the ventricles, but for the whole body of the central nervous system, there's no explanation for this, and it's not mentioned anywhere. And then for the cranial fluid, which volume-wise compared to that is smaller, it's divided again. The cranial fluid is divided from the interstitial fluid. It's separate things, and it goes on this incredible journey all the way down the spine, all the way up the spine, around the brain, and then out through the sagittal sinus that is designed to take the venous blood away, so less venous blood can go. So it doesn't give an image for healing. So for this first thing, we're going to do a meditation of kind of my way of viewing it, which is, and also from the Southern College of Osteopathy Division, is that this is a 400-mile long, very sensitive, intelligent filter through the whole central nervous system, creating mineral water for feeding the cells, and also can be used for healing. The choroplexus also is producing the same thing. So rather than a blood-brain barrier, we end up with something creating cranial fluid, like a wellhead. Then rather than this incredible journey, and this bit not being explained, that travels from the cerebrum down into the brain stem, out through the cranial nerves, from the cerebellum into the brain stem, and out through the cranial nerves, down the spine, out through the nerves. So that is my image of it. So we're going to do a meditation that, and what we'll do at the end of it will also include the more earth energies rising, which some people, who knows what is and what isn't Kundalini, but we're going to bring both of that in, and we'll move from the cranial fluid actually into the cranial nerves, the glial cells and the cranial fluid. Alright, closing your eyes and dropping into the holographic breathing. On the in-breath, the jaw is gently opening. On the out-breath, the jaw is gently closing. The lips have a gentle seal. The tongue has a gentle seal to the roof of the mouth. Relax the back of the neck. Relax the back of the head. Relax the whole body. Become aware of the heart, vibrancy of the heart, the arterial blood coming up to the brain, to the cerebrum, to the brain stem, to the cerebellum, to the spinal cord. As it goes into the brain and central nervous system, the arteries get smaller and smaller till you have 400 miles tiny capillaries. And these have a really sensitive filter on them. And they produce water, 99% water, glucose, salt. Notice the different quality of the cranial fluid as it comes out from the blood. Notice how much of it there is, how the cells really far apart, they're joined by tentacles. And it can flow through the body of the brain and through the body of the central nervous system. And notice light can travel through this. It is water, and light, it can be different colours, it can be white light, it can be dark light. It has a different quality in the cerebrum, it has a different quality in the cerebellum, a different quality in the brain stem, a different quality as it drops down through the spine starts to the spinal cord, starts to ground it. And it's through the whole central nervous system, through the ventricles, surround the whole central nervous system. And become aware, bottom third of the spine there, inside the dural sheath. This is just nerves. This is the horse's tail. These are long nerves. Be aware of the cranial fluid that's bathing these nerves. Cranial fluid coming into these nerves from the spinal cord. And allow the nerves to receive that fluid. There might be a bright feeling to that, and then that travels off through the pelvis, through the legs, through the abdomen. And the nerves through the whole spinal cord, the fluid coming out into them. And then spreading out through the abdomen, through the chest, through the neck, through the arms. And the cranial fluid in the brain stem, the cranial nerves coming out, and the cranial fluid going into the facial nerves or cranial nerves, and also being absorbed into them from around, then spreading out around your whole face, around your cranium, to the eyes, to the ears, to the jaw, and spreading out through the whole body. As these nerves go out, they're clusters of nerve capillaries, millions or billions of nerve capillaries. Each one is a little capillary. There is a channel for the cranial fluid to go out through. It keeps the cranial fluid pristine. Each one of the myelinated glial cells in these is a little filter that keeps cranial fluid pure. It will absorb more oxygen and they'll let off carbon dioxide. They'll also receive pure water. Is spread out through the whole body as a communication system based in water. And breathe. Remember the holographic breathing. Notice how healing that feels through your whole body. That cranial fluid is a transmission for light and energies. It spreads out through the nerves, it heals every organ, every joint, every cell. Has a little nerve ending next to it. And the cranial fluid, that water comes out also from the sides of the cell, from the sides of the nerves, from the very end of each nerve capillary. Cranial fluid will come out of that nerve ending. And here it goes into the interstitial fluid of the body, picked up by the lymph, slowly starts making its way back to the heart, makes a circle, where again it's goes through a 400-mile long filter through the whole central nervous system. It turns into cranial fluid. Notice the different qualities it changes from the fire of the blood into the water of the cranial fluid, and also the different quality of the venous blood going back to the heart. Arterial blood moving fast, it's of Mars, it's fire. And venous blood is of Venus, it's blue, female, or for me female. And cranial fluid, mineral water. Again spreading out through the whole central nervous system, off through the nerves, this environment of water. And notice the quality of light or energy or coloured light or dark light from the brain, from the cerebrum, the cerebellum, the brainstem, travelling down and travelling out through the nerves as a healing communication. And as it travels out through the whole body, notice you might start feeling a darker energy, maybe dark, it might be light, travelling back up the nerves, from the earth, from the body, from the bones. There's a communication rising through the cranial fluid into the central nervous system, to the spinal cord, into the brain stem, into the cerebellum, into the brain. A darkness or lightness, but coming from the earth and travelling up, nourishing the brain, connecting to the higher self. So you get the higher self coming down and spreading out, and you get the earth and the body transforming and rising. It goes both ways. And then being aware of the nerves coming out from the sacrum, the horse's tail there, as all of these nerves come down from the spine and out through the sacrum into the pelvis. Be aware of these nerves there. Notice if you can feel a pulse in the sacrum, in these nerves, that runs up the spine as an energy through the fluid, but also through the cells, through the neurons, through the glial cells, up through the whole brain, as an energy, as a transforming energy. However you experience that, it's fine. May come from the whole pelvis, may travel through the bones as well, travels up, then starts transforming through the brain stem, through the cerebellum, through the cerebrum, through the cranium, through the face, through the throat. There's a rising energy. It also connects to the higher self, to the universe. And after a while, as that goes through the brain, it starts releasing out through the nerves, through the cranial nerves into the face, through the nerves into the organs. And you can feel the physicalness of the nerves as well, through the abdomen, through the legs. Different quality, very nourishing. It nourishes the brain. From the sacrum, from the sexual organs, from the pelvis, rising. Remembering to breathe with the holographic breathing. Relax the neck, relax the head, and allow it to go through the brain. There's a grounding as it goes through the brain. gently allowing yourself to come back